Good morning, good morning. I've been looking forward to this one. Got to find my guest. I'm introducing, so I've got hair. There we are. I'll be introducing you to Toki in just a moment. She's just joining now. Toki is amazing. She's a functional medicine practitioner. I'm going to ask her to explain that, so I think that's important. It's a passion of mine. Toki helps women eliminate IBS and improve their gut health through holistic approaches. Now, you might be thinking, oh, what does that mean? Hang on. But basically, right, there we are. Holistic means the interconnectedness of all things. Everything is connected. Whether it's your sleep, your relaxation, your relationships, your nutrition, your lifestyle in general, how you manage stress, your environment, everything is connected. And that is what makes us healthy or not healthy. Good morning, Toki.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. It's really good to see you. I've been looking forward to this. I will just explain to anybody, not that they'll have noticed, they might have done. IBD and IBS are two different medical conditions, although they're kind of similar in some ways. And it's very easy to make an autocorrect mistake when you're doing your marketing, where I know we're going to be talking about irritable bowel syndrome, and yet on the advertising I put inflammatory bowel disease, which is very different, kind of similar but very different. So yeah, I'm someone that's had IBD. Toki is somebody that has experienced IBS, but we're talking about IBS today because so many people experience it, don't they?
Absolutely. I think there's about 1 in 5 people in the UK have IBS, and worldwide it's about 15 to 20% globally who suffer from IBS, and it's just such a common condition. It's just crazy how many people have it, and probably lots of people listening to this at some point with either know someone who has IBS or have had IBS themselves, and it's just horrible stuff.
And that's just the rough statistics of people that have been diagnosed, let alone that I reckon millions of people that are generally uncomfortable and grumbly and bloated and just not quite right, but they don't do anything about it because they're so used to it. They just think it's almost normal.
Yes, absolutely. It's very important to say they get used to it. People don't like to make a fuss, really, do they? And they think, oh, it's not too bad, I can live with it. Other people have it worse. So they don't do anything about it, and they just put up with it, and there's no need for that. It's not easily solvable, but it's, it can be done. You can get IBS, and it makes me so sad when people say, oh, I have IBS, I just have to live with it, or they've been told they have to live with it, and you think,
yes. And that's a lot of it, isn't it? The messages we get early on from medical professionals in the normal terms is not always that empowering, and they can't help it. They can only help within the limits of what they've trained in. So they're likely to say, get used to this. This isn't something you can really get rid of. But you know different, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Totally. I think to be fair, these days, some of them actually say, oh, try the low FODMAP diet, or, eat better, focus on your stress, but they don't give any useful tips on how to do these. It's just general advice.
Exactly.
And there's so many.
They only have so much time, don't they, to dedicate to that patient. So they can they can start to point them into those more holistic approaches, but they don't have the ability to really dig deep into that unique case, because everybody is unique with their health, and work out what is your root cause and why is it happening to you. I've got a few questions for you. I was thinking of asking you if you would mind sharing a little bit of your own story with IBS. I think it's important if you could also, after that, I'll prompt you, explain what functional medicine is, because there's a lot of, either people don't know about it, or if they do, they probably looked it up on Wikipedia, which is nonsense. So I think it would ask you to explain basically what that is. And then we'll maybe chat about maybe a big myth you've seen around IBS, how you approach it with your patients, and maybe some little quick tips for people that are struggling right now. Does that sound okay?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I was starting off with my story, I think.
Yes, please, yeah.
I've always had, a rumbly gut here and then. It's one of those, you kind of just, when it's not anything too major and it's not having a big impact on your life, you kind of put up with it. And I certainly did, even all the way through university. And my IBS type was, you know, constipation. So you think, oh, I can, you know, it's not such a big deal. It's not nice, but you deal with it. And this carried on until I had my first child, and then it got worse. And it was the bloating even after having a baby. When you've had labor pains, you can deal with pain, can't you? But IBS pains, the cramps that come with it are just absolutely awful. And I remember one day, my little boy was about 3 months old, and I was on the carpet playing with him, and I went to stand up, and the cramps that hit me, I couldn't stand up. I was just curled up, you know. I couldn't even scream. It was that painful. And I'd eaten something beforehand, but you know, you don't take note of what you've eaten. And at that point, I thought, I need to go and see someone about this. And at that point, I got told, you know, there's nothing you can do. Here's something to relax your muscle, the muscle relaxant and stuff like that. And I thought, okay, this is good. This will help. It didn't. I think for about a week or so, I thought, okay, you know, I didn't get cramps. It wasn't too bad. But it got worse. And I thought, I can't put up with this. And it got worse and worse. Second child came and it got worse. And I thought, you know what? There must be another way around this. And I come from, like, you know, a medical background, having done medicine and dentistry. And I think like most people in healthcare, we've kind of been failed by the traditional model. And then we go looking for another way. And that's when I found functional medicine, which, you know, is, as you know, most people don't know about it, but functional medicine is about looking for the underlying root causes of different symptoms and then addressing those symptoms. So it's not okay to just say, okay, you've got this ill, here's the pill to match it, and that will sort it out. No, that doesn't sort it out, because if it did, you wouldn't have a problem anymore. You wouldn't keep taking these pills, you know, forever, you know. So we found there's a completely different way. You find out what's happening. And in my case, okay, I've been a celiac since I was 7, but that's not what was causing it, because I was still gluten-free when I was having all these issues and stuff like that. And it was SIBO, in my case, a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that's another topic of its own.
It is, which is a good one. Make a note of that.
Yes, so about 70% of people with IBS, it's, you know, it's SIBO that's causing this. So it was only when that got addressed that I was fine, you know, and I'm completely okay. And 10 years on, I'm fine. So when people tell me, oh, you have to live with IBS, it makes me so sad, because that is not true at all. Now, there's lots of different ways. Like I said, there's lots of different things that cause IBS. And I think at the last count, there was probably about 12. And SIBO, like I say, is the top one for about 70% of people who have IBS. It's SIBO. Then there's leaky gut, which everyone's probably heard about now. You know, you go on Google and type leaky gut, and so many things come up. So leaky gut is another one of those. There's, you know, gut infections. So usually some people, like, you know, they've had some food, you know, food poisoning, and then they get IBS. And there's actually a new test out now called IBS Smart, which is able to use that test to diagnose if that's the cause of your IBS. So if you have, you know, IBS caused by a food infection, no matter what you do, you know, keep cutting out more and more foods, it's not going to solve anything. It really has to be addressed, what's caused that, for you to be able to get resolution of your IBS. So there's so many different causes. And I think there's the journal Microbiome just this year has come out saying, well, we all probably all know and probably guess that a poor diet, a diet that's high in processed or ultra processed foods, is very, very much linked to having IBS. And most people who have IBS have diets like that. And that's why they have IBS. So there's so many different causes and underlying causes of IBS, up to TMJ causes IBS that people need to be aware of. So if your IBS is caused by, you know, a dysbiosis or something like that, where your gut microbiome is unbalanced, you cutting out, you know, every single food isn't going to sort it, is it? Because you're not actually addressing this gut dysbiosis, where you don't have the good balance of your good bacteria and stuff like that. So you cutting out foods is not going to have any impact at all on the state of it. So these are things. So when people come to me and say, oh, I have IBS, what's the one thing I can do? And I think, there's no one thing you can do, because it depends on what's causing us. And in some people, you know, it's more than one thing causing that IBS, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's the thing of it. But also, when you say there could be like roughly 12 reasons why, maybe there could even be some more added in, it's not to make people feel overwhelmed, is it? I always find that quite empowering, because it's telling people there are reasons for this, and it's just then some investigation work to find out which one or which ones is it that's contributing to your particular symptoms. And it's fantastic to know that there are people like you out there that have experienced it themselves and overcome it. So you're the walking evidence that you do not have to live like this. And you know that you can help others actually do that, help them with their own investigations and get them back on track with how they want to feel, how they were feeling many years ago in some cases. You can get back there. In fact, you can get back there and be even better, can't you?
Oh, completely. Absolutely. Absolutely correctly. Yes. You don't have to stop at just feeling, I feel okay. You can feel in peak health, you know, have peak health conditions. Totally. Totally. Because when you work with, you know, when people come to me and work with IBS, usually it's not just an isolated thing. There's other little things here and there you can sort out. So you're working on helping them overcome what they've got and preventing other stuff as well. So you leave being as healthy as you possibly can imagine.
That's it, because it's a win-win, isn't it? Because any time we're working on ourselves to overcome some kind of symptoms, there's bound to be some kind of inflammation involved, and unsettled, an imbalance in the body. So when you start addressing that, you're helping everything else. The stuff that doesn't yet hurt, you're not really that aware of. You know, you're not just really focusing on that. If you can bring one part of the body back into good health, the ripple effect of that goes from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. So it's not just about that one thing, is it? It's just the fact that you're optimizing yourself so that as you grow older or you go through life, you can deal with challenges better. You're less likely to get something else wrong later.
Yeah.
That is why I absolutely love functional medicine, because it is just a way of looking at your health in a different way and unpicking all the pieces of your life and then addressing it in a more holistic, unique way to that individual. That's all it is, isn't it? It's not really, I would like to think that in the next 20 years, 10 to 20 years, it will come back, it will come into the NHS and it will just be good medicine. So when there is a need for medication or surgery, etc., it will happen. We're not saying you don't have that stuff, but we do need to be looking at the why behind the symptoms, not just give it a name and send you on your way with a pill, because that isn't going to do the work long term. So that's what I love about it. I see that at some point in the future, with the amount of GPs and people like yourself who are medically trained that are now getting the functional medicine training, you're coming at this from such an amazing perspective with all of the medical knowledge, but tuning it to the individual. It's got to be a win-win.
It's absolutely, what you said is key there, kind of tuning everything to the individual, because we're similar as we all are. We're all so completely different. We have completely different makeups. We have different environments around ourselves. So when we're looking at health, we're not just looking at that one symptom. We're looking at the interaction of your body with the environment as well. And I saw something a while ago which says, when you're giving people a pill for their ill, you're nothing but a drug pusher. And it made me laugh. But it's so true. It's so true, because when you're not asking people about, what they're eating, when you have animals and they have problems, you take them to the vet, one of the first things you ask is, what are you feeding them? But how many of us, when you have problems and you go see your GP, do you get asked, what are you eating? How are you eating? All these things are so important. So when I'm working with people, it's a north to south approach we take. And I look at your sleep, your hydration, sun exposure. Okay, we don't get much sun, especially this time of year when things are going downhill. But even on a cloudy day, just going outside in the morning when you wake up, it's enough to get your circadian rhythm and your health going. How much water you drinking? What type of water you drinking? Your toxins and stuff like that. All these things come into play. So it's not just, your symptoms of this. What are you having? What's happening with the symptoms? And then you focus on that. It's best to take a holistic approach with everything, because everything's so connected. We can't just fix you know, I think it's important to have specialists for different areas of the body and stuff, you know, cardiologist and gastroenterologist and stuff. But our body doesn't work like that. It doesn't work in isolation. You mentioned, you know, fixing one thing and it has a ripple effect throughout your whole body. And that's how it's supposed to be, because everything is connected. You know, it doesn't work in isolation from your gut. So it's best to have a look at all these things and see how they all play and fit together. And that's the key to having overall health. And something you're probably, you know, a big fan of here, as I am, is stress. Because
Yeah.
stress doesn't cause IBS, does it? It doesn't. But if you have IBS, you can get more stressful and get lots of anxiety about your symptoms, especially if you're having the, you know, diarrhea type IBS. So having a protocol for, you know, any problem, especially like, you know, gut problems as well, without touching on that spiritual side of things and stress management and doing your treatment isn't going to work, is it? I always say there's no healing without dealing with stress. And I'm sure
Yeah.
this is something you're aware of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the biggest things I had to do with my own recovery. And when I work with people, and sometimes they have IBS, obviously I don't work with them I don't advise them on the nutrition side. I can educate but not advise. That's who you go to Toki for that kind of thing. But I often will say, okay, so when you're getting, I really try and break down that bloating, that pain you had last night. Tell me about your meal. What was happening before the meal, after the meal? What time was it? So I'm trying to think about what is their digestive system doing at that time of day. Often they're eating really late and it's just not a great time for the body is not naturally wanting to digest and assimilate food at that time. Often they're stressed and they're rushing the food because, as you said, stress in itself won't give you the IBS, but it can play its role in the exacerbating the symptoms, because you get stressed, you get anxious, or you're distracted. You're not paying attention to what you're eating, or you're rushing your food, you're not chewing it properly, or you're not even maybe paying attention to what food you're giving yourself because you're distracted. Your messages from your brain to your gut is that you're not really ready for this food, you've got too much else going on, so you're not actually then going to digest it in a calm way, because you're literally running in that autonomic nervous system state rather than getting a little bit nearer to the parasympathetic state of rest and digest. And all of these things do play their part. And if you've got SIBO going on or any of those other things that you've said, it's just like compounding the pain and the urgency and all the symptoms of IBS.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important when you talk about when people are rushing. So I always say, you know, I think the whole point of prayer, as far as it's kind of like, you know, calm your body down and get your body out of that, you know, fight or flight sympathetic state into a rest, heal and digest state. So just taking a moment before you start eating. If you don't want to pray, just breathe. You know, even if it's just
just that.
Just that is enough to get your body into a state where it's, because when you're digesting food, it takes up so much resources from your body, doesn't it? And when you're eating, you want your body to be able to, like, you know, break down and assimilate and absorb all those foods properly, rather than you kind of rushing around. So definitely before you start eating, just stop for a moment, appreciate the food you've got in front of you. I know when we're all rushing around, it's just tempting to just eat on the go and but take your time, appreciate what you've got in front of you, and chew your food until it's like, you know, applesauce or a paste consistency before swallowing. And that's the first step in healing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. You've made me think of something else. Now, Cam has commented, that sounds like me. It might have been when we were talking about that kind of stress side of it and the rushing of food and not breathing. And if that is what you're referring to, you know, feel free to drop us DMs. We'll give you some more tips. Also, I did appreciate further up there is a question which we'll answer shortly. So thank you for that. Yeah, the mindset as well about the food. And I am taking this from people that I've worked with, and also my own experience from a different gut issue. You can start to almost see the food as a problem. So you're already kind of looking at the meal going, oh, how is this going to go? Oh, thank you, Cam. Okay, yeah, drop us some DMs. How is this going to go? Am I going to feel bad again? So you're already starting to send these kind of signals, aren't you? So it's also feeling safe with the foods, knowing that it's going to nourish you, and history doesn't have to repeat itself, because I think that if you're trying to, especially when you're like working with someone like Toki and you're already on that journey to getting better, it's almost allowing yourself on a mindset level to just go with it, and it is going to be okay. Because the pain and the discomfort and the embarrassment if you're out, and you know, this all kind of plays into it, doesn't it? So it's knowing that your body wants to heal, it wants to put you in a safe place, and it wants to enjoy that food again. That's another element that I notice with people, that they do need a little bit of support with.
So true, so true. Because, like, you know, the food, obviously, food doesn't cause IBS. And I don't like people thinking, oh, food is bad. To me, food is only bad if it's gone off or if it's robbed a bank. So even with the processed foods, there's a place for it, you know, so long as it's not forming the bulk of, you know, what you're eating. Like, talking about food, like one of the most, you know, top diets, so to speak, you know, when people come to me with IBS, is going on the low FODMAP diet.
Yeah.
I'm not saying a no FODMAP, I'm saying a low FODMAP, because food itself doesn't necessarily cause that. It can make things worse. Now, when I say FODMAPs, people are like, what are those?
You're not going to actually tell us all the words, are you?
Yes, yes. No, basically FODMAPs are like carbohydrates, sugars that your body, when eaten in excess, your body is unable to break down if you've already got predisposing gut problems, basically. So things like fructose in certain fruits, like apples. Everyone's like, apples are healthy, aren't they? Apricots are healthy, aren't they? Yes, they are. But when you have certain problems and you're unable to break these foods down, it's always a good idea to kind of step back a little from certain things. So some, you know, your apples, your broccoli, your cauliflower, you know, excessive amount of nuts and stuff like that. It's just a good idea to kind of take a step back from eating some of those foods, just to reset your gut. And then the big mistake I find people make, because everyone knows about FODMAP diets these days, they want to stay on that for life. And you think, no, it's just a minimum of 3 weeks, please, no more than that. You know, at the most, some people, you think, okay, let's go on to 6 weeks, but no more than that, because, you know, foods that are high in FODMAPs are so good for your gut, they're so beneficial. And when you cut them out completely because you're scared, rightly so, you're scared of the effect these foods will have on you, you're kind of affecting your gut microbiome to such an extent that you're kind of reducing the good bacteria, the beneficial bacteria there, which, you know, also involved in keeping you healthy. So the role of FODMAP diets basically is to keep away from some of these foods, and then do other strategies to kind of get your gut doing well. You know, focus on the stress, your chewing, you know, your hydration, your sleep, other stuff that comes with it. And you might need a little bit more nutraceutical support there, and then start introducing these FODMAP foods back in. And then just so you can identify your own personal triggers, and then know to keep away from them, maybe for a little short while, until things are, you know, healed enough for you to then try them again. But so that's one of the big mistakes I see. People on FODMAP, so they've been on it for about a year, and you think,
oh man,
no,
it's a short-term therapeutic plan for a specific reason. And I would like to say, people that do embark on that, they should really have some support through it as well, because it can be quite complicated, and it can be quite hard to follow. So yeah, it's a fantastic plan for the right person at the right time, for the right time scale. Otherwise, yeah, there's no fun in sticking on that forever, is there?
important to like cut so much food out, unless of course you know, reacting to, you're allergic to certain foods. There's just no at all.
Absolutely.
And something else I find, because kale, you know, everyone knows kale is superfood, kale is healthy, and kale is low FODMAP. And then they go overboard eating kale, and they raw kale salads, and you think, okay, oh, we're going on the right path, we're going for progress here, not perfection. But, you know, start cutting out all tough and fibrous parts of any vegetables and fruits you're eating. So for kale, cut out the raw parts, you know, the tough stems of it, and try not to have too many raw kale salads, and raw fibrous foods, keep them away. So make sure things are really well cooked, the vegetables, and maybe blend them and have some soups, or, you know, stuff like that, because that's already pre-digested in a way.
Yeah.
And it's easier in your gut then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really great. That's really great advice. What do you see as, if there was like, if I said to you, give me like the biggest myth that you see with IBS, what do you think it would be?
They're usually two. One, that it's uncommon, and one, that there's no diagnosis for IBS. There's no real diagnosis in IBS. And like we said, IBS is pretty common for, the diagnosed, officially, formally diagnosed people. We're looking at 1 in 5 people, and we know that is way more than that. Everybody knows someone who's got IBS, or they have IBS themselves. And the second one is about the diagnosis of IBS. That, how do you know I've got IBS? I've already can't diagnose IBS. And yes, IBS is kind of like a diagnosis of exclusion. Once, infections or all the structural illnesses have been excluded, whatever you're left with is IBS. But because it's so, common, there's something called the Rome 4 criteria, where you have to meet certain criteria for you to actually be diagnosed with having IBS in the first place. And it says, if you've had, like, your abdominal pain, abdominal pain at least once a week for 3 months in the last 6 months, then that's a sign you have IBS. And then you have to also have 2 other symptoms where having a bowel movement eases the pain.
Yeah.
If you had a change in frequency, so if you normally go every day, once a day, and all of a sudden you're going like 6 times a day, or you normally go every day and all of a sudden you're going twice a week, that is another, criteria for diagnosis. And then the other one is change in form, because some people say, but I still go every day. That hasn't changed. But if the stool form has changed, if you normally have well-formed stools and all of a sudden you're kind of really constipated and that little pebbles, or just loose, really loose and no form at all these are things we look at when we're diagnosing IBS.
Yeah.
But it could be caused by anything, like we said earlier.
That's really worth people knowing. And just briefly, how do you approach IBS when you meet a new patient?
When I like to say, we don't like to guess, because we know it can be anything causing their IBS. So it's best to test for things. So I'd be testing for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth to start with, because that's the most common, cause of IBS. And that's usually a breath test using either glucose or lactulose. I'd be wanting a stool test, like a comprehensive stool test, as this shows us the overall health of the gut. So
Yeah.
we look at, the beneficial bacteria there, how much of them you have, which types they are, which naughty bacteria starting to be in there. It also tells us the status, if you have any fungal overgrowth, what types of fungus we're looking at. Parasites, the immune system of your gut, that's the first, line of defense, really, the immune system of the gut. We're looking at that. Any other inflammatory markers, which I'm sure you'll be, au fait with, and, pH of the stool. So looking at little things like that to start with. And then we're looking at stress as well, and how that impacts health. So, but those 2 tests, the breath test and the stool test, are definitely basic things I'd be wanting to start with. And then we can either then narrow or exclude certain things, and then we know what else we're looking at. But without those, it can be a little bit difficult to know what's happening. I don't like general advice. As much as they got place, general advice doesn't tend to help people, really, because it doesn't tend to address what's happening with that person.
Yeah, because it's general. That's it. General. But we're not general. We're all different. That's it. Exactly that.
Indeed.
I don't want to forget this question we had. Will a purely plant-based diet reduce the likelihood of suffering IBS?
Now, that's another thing, that's an individual thing as well. But a purely plant-based diet is probably likely to make things worse, because then you're probably, unless you're having all low FODMAP foods, which, like we said, it's only for a short term, it's not likely to help. But then we're all different, and some people do better on a plant-based diet, and some people do better being more of an omnivore. So it all depends as well. If you have a good amount of stomach acid, your pancreatic enzymes and your bile, if you've got a good amount of that, then your body can probably tolerate a lot more plants. Otherwise, I do find when people have a whole, when they're just mostly plant-based, we do have a little bit more of a difficult time with their symptoms.
Yeah, and that's really, really important for people to know. So, because I think that there's so much information out there in the world about different diets and what other people are doing. I don't like calling them diets, but eating plans, that it's very easy to embark on something but it's not, you've got to really, it's best to know really what is right for your body. Just
Yes.
because it works for Sarah, who you had a chat with the other day, doesn't mean it's going to make you feel good, because like you just said, it all depends on what is going on in your body at the time and what your natural balances are with certain elements, if they're going to happily digest that or not.
Exactly.
So I think that's really important. You know, we are all quite different when it comes to what we can and can't eat.
Yeah.
Now, you have done a great job of already giving us some tips, but if there were like 3 quick tips for anybody watching today struggling with these symptoms or suspecting that they might have IBS, what would they be?
I'd be saying try and get a handle on your stress,
Yeah.
because no healing, absolutely no healing with stress. So find ways of relaxing, especially before, during, and after eating.
Yeah.
That's my number one. Definitely, that's where I always start from. So get a handle on your stress. The second thing is this FODMAP. Do try the low FODMAP diet. I'm not saying no FODMAP, so don't cut things out. So try the low FODMAP diet, but please don't stay on it indefinitely. 3 weeks is enough time for you to be on the low FODMAP diet, and then start reintroducing food and take notes. Maybe keep a diary of what you're adding in, and then what, you know, symptoms you're getting, so you know whether that's a trigger for you or not. And when you're doing the low FODMAP diet as well, like I said, don't go crazy on the stems, you know, thinking, oh, I'm going to eat all these vegetables and stuff. It can be a little bit too much for your system. So while you're doing that, remove the top stems, make sure things are well cooked. And the other one is to hydrate.
Yes.
Hydrate. Those are key. People forget to drink enough water.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic tips. So really, it's like just being really kind to your body. And then, yeah, looking at the low FODMAP diet and just taking it gently, doing it sensibly. You can always reach out to Toki if you're a little bit lost and you think you want to try that and you're not sure where to go for advice. So I know that there's many ways that people can work with you. I know that you've got a mini course, you've got a Facebook group, you do free calls with people. Can you explain to the guys that are watching now and who are going to be catching up later, if this is ringing a lot of bells with them, how can they get in touch with you and how can they work with you?
Yes. So, you know, for people watching, if this is something you've been struggling with and you think, look, I do need proper guidance, I do need to find out why I'm getting this, then I'm more than happy for you to get in touch. So you can either go to my website, which is tokibirch.com, and there's a contact button or book now. And you can also always book in to get a free call with me to start with anyway, to see if it's something I can help you with. You can also give us a ring at the clinic, which is 01772 802 041. Or like Rachel has said, you can sign up for the mini course. That's also on my website. You can join my Facebook group, A Life Without IBS. It's full of absolutely wonderful, supportive people in there going through very similar things. So you're always very welcome to come in and join us there. And yes, or give us a ring, and it'd be wonderful to. Actually, I have a Instagram page as well, so you can go on there and lots of free advice and lots of videos and recipes and stuff you can try out as well.
I love it. I'm going to put all your information on this video when I load it into the grid. Now, a comment here. I just found out that stress has no particular form. A psychologist recently told me that anticipating something that excites me could cause stress if not properly anticipated. Absolutely. Absolutely. Back when I was sick, I could literally think myself into a flare. So yes, stress, I agree. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Stress has no particular form. It's this general topic. Stress will always be there. Stress is necessary.
Absolutely.
For many functions in the body. And that's why we have a stress response. But the problem we have in this, lifestyle that we lead in this modern world is that it's running all the time, isn't it? Without us realizing it at a low level. And that's why we can get overwhelmed by it. But yes, I completely agree with that. Yeah. And yes, anything that excites you, stimulates you in a certain way, which is overwhelming the system, will cause stress, and then could cause physical symptoms, mental symptoms, all kinds of things.
You don't even need to have gut problems. If you're excited, I normally say, where do you feel it? Butterflies in your gut. Nervous, your gut kind of feels all this thing. So like I said, Rachel said, stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when it goes on for a long time, chronic stress, low level, and your body doesn't have that break for that. Because there's two systems, the fight or flight, which is the stress system, and then the rest, heal, and digest. They need to be ideally being balanced. But when you're constantly in mode, your body isn't getting a break to go into the rest, heal and digest mode, and that's when problems come in. So we just have to get strategies to balance things out a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's it. And that's why I love functional medicine, because that is just as important factor in someone's health as what they may be eating, who they may be hanging out with, what they're responding to in their environment, and how they're sleeping, etc., etc. So that's why I love this approach. I have loved this chat. Really, really loved it. Thank you to all the guys that have joined us and for your comments and your questions. I'm going to pop this on my grid so you can rewatch it and share it with your friends. Anybody you know that's complaining with their gut issues, do them a favor, share this with them, get them connected to Toki. She's as you can tell, a complete wealth of knowledge. And we'll have to do this again. Maybe next time we'll talk about SIBO, which, you know, is becoming more and more common, unfortunately, and which is a really fascinating topic. Thank you again. Have the best day, and I'll catch up with you soon.
So thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.